Hi, Mike. We're live. Good morning, my friend.
Good morning. How are you
How
doing
we
today?
doing?
Doing good. We're doing
Good.
good. We're fast and furious, right? This M&A world, I tell you, it doesn't slow down at all.
No, it doesn't. And headlines, multiple headlines every single day gives us endless ammunition over things on which to opine, which is the purpose, I think. Again, the thesis of this show was how do we create content for the masses, especially for those of us that kind of live in this every day. It's really easy to get into the nomenclature and sort of see trends. But if you're not, and you're an advisor and you're considering, how do I monetize this practice? Or how do I realize the value of my life's worth? How do I know our worth or know my worth? Where do I go or where do I start? So today, I think we got a really fun one. Like, this is a different one for us, at least. It's just the two of us, no guest. I'm also
going to go like an hour and a half longer than normal, right?
That's right.
Just the two of us. We have no one to keep us honest on time.
No moderator. Yeah, I know. This is like mom and dad are away. So we get to do what we want. So especially in light of the fact that our last one, we had Bert on, which was sort of recapping the year, which was a terrific episode. Heard from multiple friends of ours in this business that listen to it. And anytime we have Bert on, there's added excitement around it. So, but we should mention, like, that was also our longest episode of all time by 8-9 minutes. Like, it wasn't even like a close call. That was easily the most chock full episode we've done.
I guess we'll let him take as much time as he wants, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's definitely a guy that does not need, he doesn't need guidance on what we hope to cover. It's especially if I just say, hey, year in review, talk through what made us win and why we see such tailwinds go forward. He's like, yep, got it. Here we go.
Exactly.
So today, again, going back to that vein of trying to sort of educate folks that maybe don't know where to turn to get more information, we thought it would be fun to kind of recap what are the events that are a really great use of time throughout the year. It's funny, like, we used to joke conference season was sort of like Labor Day until Halloween. That's not really true anymore. I think the first trip that I took for the year that was conference related was in January. I have since taken 2 more, and we've got stuff sort of booked out through the end of the year. So there are a lot of great things that you can attend if you want to learn more around RIA M&A or wealth management M&A. So I think this is kind of our attempt to, by no means rank these or put together a top 10. It's more around what are the ones that you and I personally have attended that we have found to be very, very valuable, and then maybe just a little bit of why on each of those.
Yeah. And I think, I always joke too, the old conference season, if you want to attract us Midwest stuck in the snow type people, a January conference in a warm climate is not a bad idea. Like, for example, we had one of ours in San Diego earlier, and we had great attendance. I think a lot of us, people who were snowed in, were happy to escape to San Diego for January.
So I do have one counterpoint to that. And I can't wait to get into this one, but the Marshberry Ascend conference in particular, that was in basically Park City, right outside Park City, Utah, at the end of January. There was skiing involved. And I told them, I said, please don't ever change this venue. I grew up in Northern California skiing, being able to get out somewhere and do something a little bit different with a conference. I thought that was so unique. I said, please don't turn this into a Phoenix golf event. Although I have nothing against golf events either.
I don't either. Those are some of my favorite. But Michael, I think too, what we'll spend a little bit of time on here is we're going to talk about these events, and then while you're at these events, what are worthwhile things to be doing to get the most out of them? Because attendance is one thing, knowing the right ones to go to, but then what are you filling your day with while you're there? The great content that's there, but then maybe a few of the other tidbits of things that we think are worthwhile, especially, going with the theme of knowing your worth, learning from others who have gone through this process, both on the buy side and the sell side, I think can be important. Yeah. But to kick things off, Michael, there are a lot of events, and we probably won't mention all of them, right? There's a ton of them, but I do think there are some broad categories to these events, right? You could probably drop them into a few different buckets when you're thinking about the types of events you're wanting to go to, and getting a list of those. So how would you're kind of the pro at this with the conference attending, speaking at these sort of events. How would you categorize the options that are out there, especially going into like 2026. I know a few of them have already happened, but going into this year.
No, I think that's it's a good framing for this. I mean, there's one category, which are the events that are almost solely focused on M&A. And that is the reason for having the conference. And if it's not specific M&A around like a transaction that involves selling 100% of the firm, then it's about in preparation for the sale of a firm. And those are in my experience, generally hosted by the more reputable and successful investment banking firms. And we can get into the four, I think that I kind of always sort of pencil in and make sure that I want to attend. The second bucket is more industry events where there is an M&A track. So these tend to be hosted by either the industry publications or the custodians. And there's some terrific, just general content around building and maintaining a successful practice. And succession planning and or M&A happens to be one of the components of that. And it's an important component. And then I think the third bucket is a little more of like that miscellaneous. And I actually put our own conference in that bucket. And they tend to be conferences that are focused a lot of times from either a coaching background or around sort of a building enterprise value background. So these are not necessarily folks that are ready to transact yet. So you can go and learn from peers or talk with peers, but there are a lot of M&A professionals at the event. And it's a chance to network with both sellers and folks like you and me who do this every day and maybe ask the right questions or get more unvarnished opinions on, how to prepare their practice for a sale.
I think that is the interesting part because, kind of mentioned these buckets and we'll get into a few of the events in each of these buckets. But when you think about the M&A side, especially you mentioned there are a lot of conferences with an M&A track, right? They're not a pure M&A conference with a track. That's kind of a relatively new trend that we're starting to see over the last few years where I think transactions, we talk about this all the time. There's more and more every single year. We're setting records every single year with the amount of transactions. So I think a lot of conferences you go to, whether they're pure M&A or not, to your point, there is going to be, as you start to look at the different session options, typically there are going to be a lot of sessions that involve valuation, structure, building enterprise value, and those sort of things, which I think is a good trend. I think, going along our thing, we want all sellers to feel very well equipped and educated when they're going through the process. I like to see that those tracks are being offered, whether or not it's a pure M&A conference.
I totally agree. And you and I were talking about this before we started recording, and you brought up the concept of just picking the brains of your peers that have gone through a transaction. And a lot of times when I kind of speak at one of these events, I get asked the question like, hey, what's one piece of advice that you would recommend? And I have always sort of said, my number one piece of advice is hire representation, like have a really good advisor that is going to back you up and lead you through the process. And there are terrific ones. I mean, we've had multiple of them on this show, whether it's, Jess Polito from Turkey Hill or John Orsini from Marshberry. We had Rob Medor on a few years back, Jacqueline Martinez from Alaris. I mean, these are terrific firms that know what they're doing and do this inside and out. But when I talk to these potential sellers, I say, also like ask somebody. Most of you sort of know somebody that's gone through a transaction. And every now and then somebody goes, well, actually, I don't. Most people, I'd say 80%, 85% of the room does, but somebody doesn't. And I think you made a really good point. If you go to one of these events, you will 100% sure meet somebody that's done something like this and worked with a firm like Carson to enact that plan. And this is like your chance to get the unvarnished opinion from them on how it went and what went wrong, what went terrific, maybe how they would have done things differently, and maybe some pieces of advice that they thought or they should have asked, but they didn't.
That to me, I think is the most important piece of this and the piece that I think advisors aren't taking advantage of. And here's what I kind of mean by it. When you look at the speakers at these events and who's leading the conferences, it's a lot of you and me's in the world, right? It's individuals who are on the buy side doing this every single day. It typically is not. At our conference, we are doing a really good job of bringing in advisors who have gone through the process. You can hear from them, but oftentimes the speakers are not the advisor that just sold who went through it. So when you're at these conferences, one thing I've noticed, especially on the Carson side, right, we saw kind of this S-curve explosion of our existing partners that have decided to sell over the past 24 months. And it started small, and all of a sudden we just saw this explosion of it. And I think a lot of that was due to the fact that those conversations were happening between the advisor. Hey, how did that work for you? Like, because it's one of those, I've always considered it. I don't really know if now is the right time. And here's one example of it. I'll give a shout out to Debbie Taylor when she went through her transaction with us. What I thought Debbie did a fantastic job of afterwards was there are a lot of little nuances that are really important for advisors to understand. One example of that is you are trading off being the owner. Oftentimes you're receiving distributions. So you're trading off distributions of cash flow, right? Consider that compensation, consider it distributions. You're trading that in for consideration for the deal and rollover equity. And oftentimes doing the math on, I think a lot of advisors might say, well, that doesn't really, the math doesn't math there sometimes, right? Depending on what the valuation is. And Debbie went through that, and she did a fantastic, she mapped it all out for herself on how that would work and the trade-offs and the pros and cons. And a lot of our advisors have talked to her since then. And it's this, okay, from the advisor lens, from the seller lens, it's one thing for you and I to describe those trade-offs
Right.
and how they're going to work, but hearing it from the other side, I think it connects more. And it's just a different style of conversation, right? It's more personal. You can ask those types of questions. You can ask them, how were you feeling before and how are you feeling after? Because that's the biggest part of, 3 months in, right? And when your comp structure changed and all this is all done, how do you feel about it? I think those are the important conversations that you can have with the other sellers that you'll, when you go to these conferences, find them, grab a cup of coffee. The one thing about people who sold their business, they do like to talk about it normally, right? They just went through it. It was the biggest transaction of their entire life. They're very proud that they just, completed this transaction. They're happy to share how that all went. So if you offer, hey, want to grab a drink, grab a coffee and just chat, I have some questions. Most advisors who just sold are going to be, open to that conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think going back to our conference, our Excel conference, which I hear you and I talked about this being a shorter one. We're almost 14 minutes in. We haven't even talked about a single conference in depth yet, but this is good conversation. I mean, I think when you look at Excel, you and I both speak at that. We record episodes of this live oftentimes at that event. And, a lot of times we'll do, like I did one with Laura Delaney McElroy last year. There was sort of a macro level view of the marketplace and kind of identifying trends. They're well attended, but they're never as well attended as like when you do a panel of sellers or advisors that have gone through a transaction. Because no matter what I say, I'm a suit. Like I'm always the talking head. That is a stakeholder of Carson. And selling the value prop of Carson. To hear from an advisor and Debbie, like, geez, she's got like immediate credibility. I mean, she's brilliant. She knows this business better than anybody. And the idea that she would put together analysis of cash flow and value over time shouldn't shock anybody that knows her. Like she is going to check everything and probably understand more about it than just about any seller. So getting somebody like that. And she's also just extraordinarily generous with her time. So her being able to provide that insight and walk through it, like those sessions are always way more attended than anything you and I are going to do solo.
Yeah, those are my favorite sessions too, honestly. Yeah. And when I find myself actually going to those in our position, I go to those sessions at these conferences mainly because it does give me a little insight of what are sellers kind of struggling with mentally when they're going through this? Like what roadblocks are they hitting? Because in our mind, it might be different roadblocks than what they're considering, right? So hearing that, we can accommodate that and we can have those conversations on the front end. We want this to be as seamless of a process as possible, right? Now, transactions are hard. They just are by nature. But you and I want to make this a good experience. So I like going to those to get that insight. I'm just as curious as a potential seller would be.
I am too. And I mean, one of the things that makes this business so wonderful and why I will never do anything else is, it is so personal. And these are entrepreneurs that are going through a major life event and hearing the emotion behind the rationale that led them to that transaction and how they managed through that process, the more stories that we hear, the more we can incorporate that into what we're trying to solve for.
Exactly.
And I think the more empathetic that you and I can be as we work with entrepreneurs and they go through something like this. So it's a good ego check, I think, for you and I to hear directly from the advisors on what they were hoping to accomplish, what they did, maybe what they wished would have gone a little bit better. And it helps us refine.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So you mentioned it, right? We're 14 minutes in. We haven't even mentioned a conference yet. So let's go back to those buckets, right? You kind of gave us these categories of conferences. Would love to hear from you some examples of conferences that fall into those buckets and how they could benefit someone that's listening to the show.
Yeah. So I think the first bucket that we wanted to talk through are the M&A focused conferences. And oftentimes these conferences are used for a variety of reasons. They're usually covered by the media. So you'll usually see, Citywire, Wealth Management, our friends kind of that work in this space at these events. You will see prospective clients of the investment banks. So the four that I'm going to mention are all run by one of the larger investment banks that do a lot of business in the space. So they might be prospective clients or current or former clients of this investment bank. And then you'll see the buyers there. So folks like us, and then ancillary, support. So maybe fintech or investment management, sort of these other folks that play in our arena. But the four that I have attended and continue to attend and participate in and would always attend, I think that are really the best in the business are the Marshberry Ascend Summit, which I mentioned, that was out in Park City. That's an invite-only event. Marshberry is just puts on a terrific slate of content. It's almost exclusively focused to potential sellers. So there are a lot of folks that are sort of grappling through what's a process look like? What do I actually want to accomplish? Who should I be networking with? How do I think through 1099 versus W-2 ensemble? And it's also a really nice event for folks to sort of legitimize their structure. So that event's in January. It was inaugural this year. And I'll be honest, I thought it was one of the best events I've ever been to in this space. It's a much more controlled setting. I think there were about 105, 110 people that were a part of that conference. And I had a dinner and I'm sitting next to a gentleman that's got, 3-4 billion with several 1099 offices, kind of built like Carson, frankly. And he's sort of navigating how do I go through the process of creating enterprise value versus these silos of value. And then how do I thoughtfully approach the market when I'm ready? Whereas across the table, there's a firm that's, $1 billion and they're younger. And the idea of a sale isn't necessarily there yet. It's more like capital structure. How do we prepare ourselves to really grow the value of this firm so that maybe in 10 years, when we're ready, then we're going to be in a really good spot. And we have networked with people like Carson or peers that would be a potential buyer or a partner for us. So that was it was 2 half days of content with some fun in the afternoon and sort of these curated dinners. That one was just excellent. I've already got it on my calendar for January of next year. Like I will never schedule anything around that. And then 2 others that I think are very, very worth, or 3 others, I should say, that are very worth attending. The Gladstone conference in April. They usually do it in Philadelphia, which is where they're based. Gladstone's an old name in the space. That's, I would say, more like the DeVoe conference, which is the 3rd one that I would mention. And there's a mix of buyers and sellers. So if you think of the Marshberry one being, like 85 to 90% potential sellers or folks kind of going through the process, the Gladstone and DeVoe conferences are maybe more like 60-40 potential clients or sellers versus the buyers. So you get sort of a nice cross section in the room. And also really well-produced events. So Gladstone is Philadelphia in April. I'll be there this year. And then DeVoe, this will be my, 5th, 6th time going. That's another one like I would never miss. That is generally in the traditional conference season. So that one rotates. It's been in Chicago twice. It's been in Dallas. It's been in, trying to think all the places we've been. We're going to be in, I think, Huntington Beach this year in the end of September. But that's a terrific one, usually a very nice venue, and a good chance to hear from panels, I think, in particular with DeVoe. So I've been lucky enough to participate in that one a couple of times and be on stage with great peers. Like, last year I was up there with Beacon Point and Edelman, and just kind of approaching the market from 3 totally different lanes and offering advice like higher representation and thoughtfully think of your G2s and how do I get equity into their hands before I go to market and do a transaction. But it's that's I think one of the events that if you really want to network with folks, you can't miss. The other thing I really like about the DeVoe event in particular is the chance to meet one-on-one. And it doesn't have to be with buyers. So you can sort of sign up for these 15-minute speed dating meetings, and you'll sit at a table and over the course of an hour, meet with 4 people, or hour and a half, meet with 6 people. And I'll meet with potential sellers, which is really useful. We have 2 transactions now that started with seeing me on a panel at one of these conferences, at the DeVoe conference in particular, and then doing the one-on-one meeting, and then maybe meeting for breakfast, and then that turning into an engagement, and eventually us being able to win that partnership. But it doesn't have to be with a seller. If you are, or excuse me, with a buyer, if you are trying to learn more about this business, there will be firms that are not of the size and scale of a Carson that maybe don't know what their future entails, that'll sign up for these one-on-one meetings, and you can meet with a peer and have a conversation around what they're trying to accomplish or what you're trying to accomplish, and maybe sort of brainstorm on where things go. And then
I want to hit on something right there.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think the interesting part in all of this is not taking anything away from the speaking sessions, because you and I speak at these, and I think those are fantastic. In my opinion, though, a majority of the value that attendees are going to get from this is in those types of activities you just mentioned, right? Those speed dating one-on-ones, the networking, go to the events, right? The Marshberry, you mentioned skiing, right? Out there. Mm-hmm. Go to those. I think those are what's going to lead to the most fruitful conversations and connections, and even follow-ups. There have been a lot of ones that I've gone to where even if the conversation doesn't, you don't have an hour-long conversation at the conference, you had a 10-minute conversation and you end up having a phone call when you both get back home and you're talking through more things. It's those connections that you're building. I know, the temptation to skip some of those social events at some of these, right? You've sat in sessions all day. You kind of want to, go and relax a little bit. But I think that's where a lot of the value comes from. Would you agree or disagree?
I could not agree more. You and I joke that we do this all day, every day. Like, we talk about this in our sleep. But most of the people that sort of live in this world, that is true. I mean, maybe not literally, I'm not talking about this in my sleep every night, but this is fun for us too. Yeah. So that Marshberry event in particular, I'll just say the first day or second day, whichever day it was that we were in this gondola, we finished the session, which was terrific. I mean, it ended with Peter Maluk speaking on stage with John Orsini, just a terrific sort of capstone to the content. And then, we all go get skis, and a bunch of us head out, and I'm in the gondola with, Liam on our team. And then we've got Tina from Marshberry and her husband, Andrew Forsch from Citywire, and my peer Henry at Lido, having a conversation around not just skiing and the content that we saw that day, but around sort of industry trends and how we're all sort of like approaching or things we're hearing. I mean, there's gold in these conversations that you're exactly right. Come on the boat ride when you're at the DeVoe conference in Chicago, or when you're riding up the mountain at the Marshberry event, or you're out on the golf course at the Echelon event. I mean, these are world-class events with world-class people, and a real chance to kind of hear from everybody, not just one, how they're doing things. So that is the fourth event that I cannot miss is Echelon. That's usually the week before Labor Day, typically in California, at just a unbelievable backdrop. I mean, it's like I think we're at the Ritz-Carlton overlooking Laguna Niguel in the ocean. There's a golf event that starts that. And the echelon one is a little bit different from the other four too. I mean, that's kind of a, they sort of position it as a master class in tactics for buyers. So almost all of my peers are going to be at an event like that. And you will hear some pretty in the weeds discussion on deal structuring, and Dan Sievert, the CEO of that firm, will usually do a debate with Mark Tabergen, former CEO of Pershing, which is a great event. It's fun. So that's a chance for folks like us maybe to get even more in the weeds. And then obviously if you're considering partnering with a firm like Echelon, it's a great event to hear from their experts on what they're seeing and why they're doing things the way they do.
Conferences where we get to nerd out on deal structure. Yeah. Sign me up.
And it's important. Yeah, you're exactly right. It's important to note there's a lot of overlap with some of the participants. We're going to talk about custodial events here in just a second, but most of our custodial partners are at these events too. I mean, Schwab and Fidelity are both typically present at all of these events. I mean, Laura Delaney from Fidelity and our team, Shane and Julie from Schwab are usually at one of these events, taking in their clients speaking on stage. And then also it's a way to sort of facilitate some of these one-off conversations that you and I were just talking about too.
So that, I think that's a good summary of pure M&A conferences, right? And
Yep.
there's probably a few more out there too. Next bucket, right? You mentioned conferences that have a specific M&A track.
Yeah.
Let's talk about a few of those.
Yeah. So these, I think, come down to more of the industry events or the custodial events. And let's start with the custodians, because those are, I think, the ones that most people here or listening are going to be familiar with, especially if you use Fidelity or Schwab. Schwab Impact is, I think, kind of like the Super Bowl of this space. It's a gigantic event. And I mean, they do a terrific job. It's a big conference center. There are 5,000 plus people there. You're going to hear everything going on in Schwabland, and anybody that uses them is going to be there. All of the buyers are going to be there and usually have a booth. So we sort of joke, they always kind of put us on like Murderer's Row. Like you walk down one hallway and it's us and all of our friendly competitors across from each other. It's like, don't walk down this hallway unless you want to get pitched or you want to have a conversation around succession planning. But there's usually a specific M&A track or events around that. So there will be panels of sellers or buyers, and they do a nice job of kind of covering the gamut of transactions too. So it won't just be the fully integrated type purchasers. You might have one of the more platform or capital providers, somebody that does a minority investment, but isn't sort of like bringing you on to their ADV. It's just hey, we're going to invest in you and take preferred dividends. So you might have a chance to kind of hear from somebody a little bit different from us. And then Fidelity does their inside track events, which are more regional. So historically they've done, and I know this has changed, all of these have changed quite a bit through COVID before and after, but those Fidelity events, the last few years, they've done a Chicago event, a Boston event, and a San Diego event. And those are also invite only. You got to be a Fidelity customer to participate. But, the great Laura Delaney McElroy, I joked with her yesterday. I think she gets mentioned in every one of these or most of these. She's there generally and providing content, and it's a chance for you to hear from one of, in my opinion, the best macro minds in this space on where they see the industry going and any trends in valuation and what drives valuation. Usually they'll present the findings from their annual studies on what's driving some of these transactions. So those are both really good events to get more of the institutional view, Schwab and Fidelity. But also it's a networking event, as always, to meet with folks like you and me and other potential sellers.
And this specific bucket too, I think one of the questions that advisors will ask is like, when is the right time to start attending conferences with the M&A mindset, to learn more about M&A, to learn about doing a transaction? And I think there is kind of a spectrum there of, I'm looking to do a transaction in the next 24 months, 5 years, 10 years, beyond 10 years, right? You're kind of like in those modes. And I think as we're going through these buckets, as we start to get in, especially this one with M&A trend, this is maybe where you're starting to feel a little more comfortable signing up to go. If you're a little more in the distant, right? This is something that 5 to 10 years, 10 years plus about doing a transaction. You can go to all these no matter what stage you're at. But I think attending them, what I've seen is when you start going to these types of sessions at these conferences or M&A specific conferences, it does change your mindset a little bit about how you're running your business. When you start thinking about it and framing it in terms of enterprise value, it can be a good thing. And if you have that and you're like, okay, well, good, I'm 10 plus years out from ever doing a transaction, but I'm going to start building my business and running my business in a way that I know is going to lead to a really successful outcome in the future whenever I do sell. So I do think as we're going through these buckets for the advisors to keep in mind, even if you are far out and you're not thinking about doing something now, as we start to get into some of these might be good ones to go to and just do the M&A track on it, just to learn, right?
I agree.
You don't have to go through the gauntlet, right, of all the sellers and worry about being pitched right away. It can be more of an information gathering and more of think about it more of how I'm going to run my business over the next few years to be a really efficient, high enterprise value firm.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Actually, I've never thought about it that way, but you're exactly right. I mean, if I were maybe a few years out, and I know that at some point I'm going to need to start doing something around succession planning, I would probably start with Schwab Impact or Fidelity Inside Track and trying to glean as much information as I can. It's a little bit less because it's not all about M&A. You don't feel under sort of pressure to sign or transact or get pitched. Whereas I would say if you're closer and you know that the clock is ticking, then you need to be attending one of, in my opinion, the investment banker. I mean, that's where, like, if you're not at the Marshberry or the Echelon or DeVoe event, Gladstone, like you're probably doing yourself a disservice because you're going to run out of time to capture enterprise value if you're not thinking about it ahead of time. Yeah. I also, you talk about that mindset around like, when is the right time? We talk on and off a lot about the 7 years prior to retirement. And the rationale for that is that it takes, roughly a year to get your business into the right position. Then you're going to work with really good sell side representation to get ready for a sale. And then that process is going to take about a year when you look at like building the SIM and gathering financials and then interviewing all the folks, going through an LOI, transacting, getting through a transition. And then, firms like us, we value growth in the business above all else generally. And if you've got organic growth exclusive of market, we can give you credit for that if you're going to be around. So you need to be around through the earnout in order for the firm to grow the way that it has been, because no firm grows without the founder quite the same, generally speaking. So, and a lot of that content, Mike, like we heard some of this sort of like framing around this from Invesco at a Fidelity Inside Track and DeVoe. They were at DeVoe too. So hearing some of the math behind this sort of changed the way that we think about M&A and the way that we started communicating with our partners around M&A and why they need to be proactive in this and not just wait until it's 6 months till retirement and go, all right, I guess it's time to do something now, because they are leaving dollars on the table.
Well, and that data, that 7-year data, to your point on our partners, actually comes from our partners. It's interesting, right? So I've been at Carson for 8 years. And when you look at the data, we have a lot of partners that joined 7-8 years ago, grew massively with us, right? Started focusing on growth, organic growth, maybe did a minority transaction along the way. And now I talked about that S-curve explosion of a lot of existing partner firms that we have that are choosing now is the right time to sell. It's that 7-year period. And guess what they were talking about 7 years ago, right? Building that enterprise value. How do I grow? They were in the growth phase of that, right? Setting up the business. And then a few years in, they started talking about, okay, maybe more of the structural side of things, retirement, those sort of pieces, the team I'm building, succession planning, those sort of pieces. Fast forward then a few more years, and now's the right time. So that data comes from what we see, right? I love the 7-year timeline. I reference it all the time. I think it's a perfect reference for when
I think it's a good way to think about it too. Especially if you are maybe your early 50s, or even as you and I have talked about quite a bit. Now we're seeing, folks around my age. We're talking about mid to late 40s that are sort of thoughtfully thinking about getting access to a faster growing equity piece. This is a big part of what we talked about with Bert.
Yep.
How do we diversify our holdings and get into something that is going to grow faster than I can on my own? And I think like Micah Shalansky at Shalansky and Associates in Alaska. I mean, that's like the perfect example of a firm like that, where There is no slowing down for that team. Jamie, on the first call, I joke about, but I mean, we're talking about world domination. She's like, we are going to be successful wherever we're at. We need the firm that's going to best prepare us for that success, and sign on with a winner. So that's like exactly who we want.
Rollover
One more
equity, as long as it's with a winning firm, has changed the game in terms of timeline.
That's
right.
Exactly
that just has like in this RIA space, with the rapid expansion of enterprise value of all of the large RIAs like a Carson, that has changed the game in terms of going back to Debbie's point, right, on doing the math of what the trade-offs of owning your business versus owning some rollover equity, distributions versus compensation, those sort of pieces. The math has changed a little bit.
Oh yeah. You're right. The last one I'd mention in this bucket too, that I was just very impressed with, this was my first time attending this last year, was the Wealth Management Edge Conference, the big one they do but it was in Boca last year. I think we're going to be back in Boca this year. Boca in June is not the greatest time to be in Boca, but it's a beautiful resort. And it's a really well-run event. So it's not as big as like the Schwab Impact event, but similar in content, in that you're going to get access to sort of like the general outlook on our space and see all of the big vendors and tech providers and TAMPs and RIAs. And they also do that speed dating thing. So for us, and this is just I think if we had like an investment bank that was listening to this, especially if you're maybe a newer sell-side advisor, this is a great way to get plugged in with the buyers. So they do the speed dating thing. I had a table and did 4 meetings over an hour on the first day, 4 meetings over an hour the second day, all with newer sell-side advisors or maybe folks that had broken off from a larger firm and started their own firm. And it was their chance to sort of speed date us and learn the Carson story and what makes us unique. And that leads to engagement. I mean, that leads to getting plugged into the space and knowing who the ideal fit for your potential client might be. So that's another one that we're going to participate in here in June. And it was a great event, really well done. And all of our investment banking partners and friends were there. So one I wouldn't miss. I should mention, I talked about Fidelity's location, Schwab Impact. That one changes. So it's usually in a big city with big convention center space. That tends to be the capstone of the conference season. So that one usually is at the end of October, early November. And that has been it was in Denver this last year. It was San Francisco the year before that, Philadelphia, I think the year before that. I think we're going to be in Boston this year. Don't hold me to it. But that's like the very end of the season, generally speaking. So you go from that into kind of the holiday season.
Perfect. Okay, so moving into these kind of final two categories that you had mentioned as we go on from here. So we've talked about the pure M&A conferences, more of your, custodian level conferences that have an M&A track. What are some other ones? Yeah,
so I think 3 more that I would mention that I've been fortunate enough to participate in or speak at. The Elite Wealth Advisor Symposium. That was in Phoenix in February. That was this month, actually, beginning of this month. That's a unique conference. So Brian Sweet and his team sort of put that one on. They're partners at Carson. There are coaching members that are part of this Elite Wealth Advisor group, and this is their annual conference. And I think what I found unique about this one is you have a lot of the regular stuff that you would want from a conference like this, like how do I meet with my peers and find out what's making them successful? But there's also some kind of neat ancillary topics that you can gain access to. So they had Scribe Media there talking through like why to publish a book and how to publish a book and how do you even kind of go through that process. And, events around like wellness and mental health and not just building a sustainable practice, but how do you take care of yourself and your legacy as part of this building a practice? That's a more intimate event. I think that was, 65 to 80 people. Phoenix in February, to your point, so we were talking about earlier, like it was gorgeous. I think it was like low 70s or high 60s. Beautiful time to be there. So that's a really neat one. And Liam, my partner in crime and we spoke at that event on sort of M&A, just general topics. And then one of our friendly competitors was there too. So you could hear kind of 2 sides of how this works. And then the Perfect RIA, which is one of our, in our industry, one of the better known podcasts. That's Matt Jarvis and Micah Shalansky, who we mentioned earlier, that do that. It's their big summit, which they do with the Retirement Tax Symposium, is in September. That's also in Phoenix. That's a bigger conference. So that's about 200 to 300 folks. And that's bringing together sort of all the best of what makes their coaching organization successful. And we will be a guest at that conference and participate. And that's again, sort of an industry event that is not focused on M&A, but you can get some really good M&A content if you choose to attend. And then final one, I think we would be in trouble if we didn't mention ours. Excel is a terrific event. It has been in the Kitsis list as one of the better events from a practice management lens to attend for a long, long time. That has taken a little bit of a different focus, obviously, just over the last 3 or 4 years. And actually, why don't you kind of describe that? Because you've been around longer than I have, but just you've seen that focus change over the 8 years that you've been here.
Yeah, I mean, and that focus, I think, historically, this was an industry conference, right? Where it was a lot of advisors, whether they are affiliated with Carson or not, all came, same practice management, same great content. I think a few years ago, really, we started to shift that with a little bit tighter focus on Carson. And I think as Carson's offering has just expanded and matured, we had so much content we wanted to cover on practice management, but what we realized was it was so specific to all the tools and resources that the advisors have at Carson, that was really our target audience. Our target audience is we have the size and the scale, bring all of our advisors in. Let's talk about all the great tools and resources you have at your fingertips, share best practices, all of those sort of things. So I think that's really where it kind of shifted. However, what we do, if we do have a lot of advisors who are really interested in, is Carson the right fit? And that's a perfect conference for them to come to. And I would always encourage people, if you're slightly interested in joining Carson, come, because I think that is the best example. You will get days worth of material on just the differential, the differentiator Carson is in the industry, in what we're doing in all areas, right? You got Danny Fava up there on stage talking about how, the tools that she's building on the tech side with AI and everything is going to make the advisor more efficient, right? Mm-hmm. How can you serve more clients? How can you do better? So doing AI in the right way. I love her take on it. You've just got to hear her speak on it. You've got, our private client offering and our advanced solutions and those sort of things where our advisors can now go attract literally billion-dollar clients that they wouldn't have been able to service before, just because the needs of those types of clients are so high. So I love the shift that we've kind of made. I do think it's a need to attend for all Carson advisors.
Oh yeah.
And I would say for anyone who's kind of looking for that next home or looking for what are the offerings even out there.
Yeah.
It's a great conference to come to.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you see the growth that we've had, in particular over the last 4 years. And we've gone from 4 fully integrated offices to now we'll be announcing our 40th very soon. We have our 39th that we're announcing next week. We're getting to the side, and then that's obviously we still have 180-ish partner firms around the country too. So just seeing all of us sort of get together and share what makes this community so special. That's sort of a fill your cup event for me. I mean, when I leave, I'm always a little bit sad to be leaving that event. I know last year, I think I was going from that to DeVoe, actually, which again, I'll never miss. But flying from Carson to DeVoe, there's a little bit of melancholy as I leave the Carson conference. But obviously the excitement of headed to the DeVoe one as well. And that one we're doing September again this year too, right?
Yes, correct. And I like how we sprinkle in, it's a lot of practice management, all those sessions, but we've had George W. Bush, Sean White, all these sort of amazing speakers that are
just to highlight the dichotomy right there of George W. Bush and Sean White.
It was intentional. It was intentional, right? To show the spectrum of,
Yeah,
for interest level all across the board of who you're thinking of learning from, but, not specific around the advisor space, right? They're not advisors, but hearing their perspective on a lot of different things. I enjoy that piece of the conference a lot. I think
I do too.
Interesting sessions to attend.
I do too. All right, I think that's our list, right? So just to recap, speed round, the first bucket, the investment banker specific ones, the Marshberry Ascend Conference, the DeVoe M&A Succession Plus, the Echelon Deal and Dealmakers Conference, and the Gladstone M&A Conference. I think all four of those are excellent events if you're trying to get a broader insight into what makes this world tick. The more industry specific ones that have a dedicated M&A track, generally speaking, it's the Wealth Management Edge Conference, and then it's the custodial events. So Schwab Impact and Fidelity Inside Track. And then other events that I have found wonderful and useful. It goes without saying, the Carson Excel Conference, but also the Perfect RIA. If you are a member of that firm, their summit is not to be missed. And Elite Wealth Advisor Symposium, again, if you are a part of that consortium, one that you shouldn't be missing. And
as we're doing our summary, Michael, I realized at the beginning we did not state we're not being paid by any of these conferences to say anything.
Good point.
Right? Yeah. This is purely Michael and I attend a lot of these conferences. We speak at a lot of them. We've been to them, and we just want to get, for those who can't attend all of them, want to give you just a quick recap so you can kind of get a gist of the benefits of each and kind of the unique nature that each of them brings. They all do things a little bit differently. So depending on what you're looking for as an attendee, as an advisor, hopefully it gave you kind of a behind the curtains look. But yeah, we're not paid or anything to send people these conferences.
No, it's a great point. And there are conferences that we didn't list that we just say because we haven't been yet, or there was a conflict. So if it's not on this list, it's not derogatory at all towards them. It's just, these are ones that we have not only attended once, but in several of these cases have been multiple times. And I mean it. Like, there are some of these that, like, I schedule vacations around, or I won't schedule something until I know the dates of some of these, because I have to be there to keep sharpening my saw.
Yeah. Well,
awesome.
March is only 3 days away. So we've got another one of these coming pretty soon here. So keep your eyes out on LinkedIn for the topic for next month. It's going to be a fun one. Again, pretty excited for it. But yeah, keep an eye out on LinkedIn for next month's episode. This has been fun, Michael.
Hey, it has. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.